Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are in January, which we've just ascertained in the Northern Hemisphere is quite cold. Not to be confused with the Southern Hemisphere, in which, I don't know, in South Africa, it's presumably the summer holidays or something like that.
Well,
Yeah,
yes, I mean, in Australia, they're playing test matches.
there you are. Have they gone back to school yet?
Don't know.
When do South Africans start school again?
No
No.
idea.
Well,
Don't
I
have any
think they've got a
connections down
different,
there.
yeah, they do. I think January to December is their year. It's a whole different thing.
I understand, but when do they start back on like the 4th of January kind of thing?
I think they might do, yeah. It's
Google it.
we just had some Australians coming over whilst they were on university break, and they've gone back, I think, to start.
Nice. We're not jealous at all. Nice. Okay. Let me share where we're up to, which is definitely not there, but it's here. Can you see this, the book?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
okay,
you.
great. Okay. So I actually think so last time, if you remember, we did most of this, if you remember, which was
Yeah.
the what were the reasons or the purposes, the purpose joke, purposes of the Beis Hamikdash, right? We saw Rashi
Yeah.
said it was atonement for the golden calf. We then scrolled down and saw the Ramban, place for the Shekhinah, in other words, constant miracles, a microcosm of Matan Torah, temporary miracles, albeit very powerful, when Matan Torah, and the more permanent version of that was the Mishkan, hence a lot of parallels between them. And then we had the Sefer HaChinuch, a place in mitzvahs where our hearts would be inspired to Hashem's service. Yeah, hearts with the A for those in Bournemouth. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, all right. You can afford me that in the first few minutes. And we talked about spiritual ozone layers and us being more susceptible to Hashem's presence in some areas over others. Nice. Okay. So today we'll do something that starts a little bit technical, but I want to get into a bit of meat, which is the following. Firstly, just to note the differences between the two Batei Mikdash. Now, if I tell you there's a difference between the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash, we know that, right? Because one is temporary, the Mishkan, and it was kind of moving with us. Maybe more accurately, we were moving with it. And the Beis Hamikdash was permanent. It was a permanent structure. Once it got going, it was permanent until it was destroyed, and then rebuilt, permanent until it was destroyed. And now the question is, were there any differences between them? Now, I don't mean technical stuff and height of this and size of this and all that kind of stuff. I mean, were there any differences, kind of real differences between the two Batei Mikdash? Now, what would indicate that there were? What may indicate that they were?
I thought there was a decrease in the level of holiness between the first and the second.
Oh, very good. There certainly was. Excellent. Excellent. Hi, Jeremy. Yeah, there absolutely was a difference between the first and second holiness. And as we'll see, I think I've got over here, the sins that destroyed those temples were also not fluke. In other words, sometimes you can see what something was through how it gets destroyed. Yeah. In this case, very much so. So let's have a look again.
The second Beis Hamikdash isn't that the one where there was all the corruption and people buying Kohanic gadolship and things like that?
Yes, some of those cases are ongoing, so I'm not able to comment on the details. Yeah, there was. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. You mean like people using AI to fill out, you know? We move on.
This. Careful what you say.
We move on. That case is certainly ongoing. It's fine. I can also make up excuses after deciding what to do and who to ban. Okay, next. Differences between the Bate Mikdash. Let's go. So there's a Gemara in Yuma, which is really interesting, and it says as follows. Can everyone see the top of the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's funny now you can actually see. This is actually the name of the book, Building Blocks. I was very tempted to call it Depth Charge, but I thought, you know what, I'm not going to name a book after a ride in Thorpe Park. Anyway, it says the Gemara in Yuma as follows. Eilu chamisha dvarim, these are the 5 things. Shahayu bein mikdash rishon and mikdash sheni. Yeah, these are the 5 things that distinguish the first from the second Beis Hamikdash. And these are they. Yeah, Aron. Yeah, so the first Beis Hamikdash had an Aron, right, meaning where you keep the luchos. The kapores, and the kruvim. Kaparos went on top of the Aron, and the Kruvim went on top of that, meaning the angels look like that. Yeah, broadly speaking. Aish, you know what I mean? Meaning the what they call what are the Kruvim called in English?
Uh, cherub.
Cherubim. Yeah, okay, shkoyach. Angelic like models on top of the cover of the Aron. Okay, Aish. Interesting. The fire that descended from heaven, the miraculous fire, was only present in the first temple. A Shechina. It's funny. All the others are like, okay, I hear that. And Shechina, oh my goodness. Yeah, Shechina is Hashem's presence, right? And that's Hashem's heightened presence. That was not in the second Beis Hamikdash. We'll see more about that in a second. Ruach HaKodesh and Urim v'Tumim. There was no prophecy, I guess you call it, semi-prophecy, nor Urim v'Tumim. Now, Urim v'Tumim, if you remember, the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wore was a primordial iPad, yeah, and it would light up when people asked the Kohen Gadol certain things, right? It would light up. Okay, now you also notice it's a Jewish count of 5 because there are at least 7 things in the list. Yeah.
Can you explain? Like, are you saying there was no Aron, there was no container for the Luchot in the second Beis Hamikdash?
Yeah, basically.
Right. And so then why does it even list the Kaparot and the Keruvim, which were all part of the Aron?
Well,
if there's no Aron, how can you have?
Very good. And that's basically because the easiest way to get the list down from 7 to 5 is you count these 3 as 1. Right? I mean, they are separate things, albeit I wonder what would be the halacha if you didn't have an Aron but you had the other 2. I'm assuming you would. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, okay. Note, very important. There's a similar saying in the Medrash in footnote 118, which does not list the Shechina as one of the differences. In other words, there is an opinion that the second Beis Hamikdash indeed had the Shechina. Interesting, right? Now, why is this all important? So, like this, the greatness, I would say, the quality of the first Beis Hamikdash was its spiritual voltage and level. It was invested with miracles. It had daily miracles. That's what it was about. Right? It was a very high level. The second Beis Hamikdash did not have, as you can see, the various different things which would increase its level, or be symptomatic of a high level. And therefore, its quality was actually not the spiritual voltage element, but it was the national unity that it created or expressed. But the way the Maharal says it is that the first Beis Hamikdash corresponded to the Kedusha of the Avos, whereas the second Beis Hamikdash corresponded to our unity, our Achdus as a nation. Yeah? He says it's no fluke, therefore, that the sins that destroyed each one basically undid the special quality of each one. Meaning the sins that destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash were. So I'll do this.
I thought they were like not saying brachas before learning or something.
So there are other things mentioned, you're right, but the main 3 are the big 3: murder, adultery, and idolatry. Yeah, those are the big 3.
So what you're saying that's what was going on during the times of the first Beis Hamikdash?
That's what destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash, yeah. So that went on at some stage, yeah. Apart from that, everything was good. So those represent a complete breakdown in what's in Kedusha, right? Hence the first Beis Hamikdash, which stood on Kedusha, was destroyed. Second Beis Hamikdash, which was not predicated on Kedusha because the Shechina wasn't there, it was predicated on unity. What sin destroyed that one?
Baseless hatred.
Baseless hatred. In other words, kind of that undid the fabric of unity. Yeah, disunity, exactly. Okay, good. That's another way of using it. Now, Rav Shneir Zalman of Liadi, who is otherwise known as the Sefer HaTanya, right? He wrote the Tanya, which is kind of the most famous Hasidic work. He says as follows. He says, by the way, that's why they thought, according to some, I should add, that the second Beis Hamikdash would be around forever. It would be like kind of almost like not destroyable, indestructible, because it was a lower spiritual voltage and therefore easier to quote unquote maintain. Right? Others actually completely disagree. Others feel that the second Beis Hamikdash was always set up as a stopgap, and it would be the intro to the third Beis Hamikdash, which should have come quickly. Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, it didn't, and it didn't come quickly at all. Okay, says the Rosh Zaman Liadi, interesting. He says the second Beis Hamikdash will do the English element. Says the second Beis Hamikdash did not have the Aron of the Luchos. The rabbi said the Shechina did not dwell there. Right? What this meant was that the high level of Shechina existed in the first Beis Hamikdash was not present in the second Beis Hamikdash. In other words, he is redefining that statement of Chazal, saying it's not that there was no Shechina in the second Beis Hamikdash. It meant it was a lower level. It wasn't discernible comparable to the first Beis Hamikdash. That makes sense? Again, it's an opinion. I don't think everyone agrees with it, but it's an interesting opinion nonetheless. Yeah, in other basically, there's debate about your point, Gideon, whether indeed the Shekhinah resided in the second Beis Hamikdash. The Medrash says it did, the Gemara says it doesn't, but Rosh Zamaliadi interpreted that Gemara to say that it's not that it didn't completely reside, it was kind of there in a more cogent form, if you can say such things. Nice? Okay. What I just quoted you before was the Maral in terms of the qualities of the Beis Hamikdash. I'm just going to pick out some of the Hebrew over here. It's in bold because it's been put in bold. Zeh Malas Beis Hamikdash Rishon. Can you see on the screen that it's in bold?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is the level of the first Beis Hamikdash. Shaya Mayuchad B'Mala. Its great quality. Is speciality almost is Shahaisa Shechina Sherba, that the Shechina was dwelling in there. Yeah, that was its quality. However, he says, Aval Mikdash Sheini, Malas Mikdash Sheini in the bold over here. Second Beis Hamikdash Haya Machmas Yisrael Atzma. The quality was because of the Jewish people. V'davar zeh boror, and that was clear. Ki Yisrael hem misachtem al Beis Hamikdash shaylahem. The Jewish people were united. Misachtem, the word echad. They became united through this Beis Hamikdash that they merited or that they had. Right, so two different qualities, etc. And Gideon, I'm going to give you a bit of a challenge. You ready for this? Yeah, it's something that I feel you would like. Maybe anyone would, but I actually thought of you. Just like this. And if we say that the sins correspond to the Beis Hamikdash, so the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because the sins created tumah. The second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because the sins created disunity. Right now, we have quite a popular phrase, which is it's a Gemara really, which is any generation in which the Beis Hamikdash hasn't been rebuilt, it's as if they've destroyed it. Right, which means basically on Tisha B'Av, the rabbis get up and say, look at what caused the second Beis Hamikdash destroyed. It was the sinas chinam, and you've got to correct that, and you've got to stop hating each other, and you've got to love each other. Everyone kind of looks and says, okay, but not him. Yeah. What's it called? That's kind of what's talked about, right? Now the question is, according to this Maharal, why should that be so? Meaning, who says that? I'm asking it as a question. I don't think they're wrong. It's a nice thing to think about. If the point is the sins corresponded to that quality of Beis Hamikdash, then who says that what we need to fix is baseless hatred? Maybe baseless hatred was the thing that destroyed the second temple. But who says, second temple, because the quality of the second temple was unity. Who says that's the thing to fix, to bring the third temple?
Yeah.
Good
I
question.
think that's a good question. I think also I was listening to a History for the Curious podcast about the menorah, and Rabbi Hirsch explained that we're not so concerned about the menorah from the second Beit HaMikdash, because that's not about, we don't need to find that in order to bring the third. It's a separate thing altogether. So it feels like it's a good question because it doesn't mean that fixing baseless hatred will bring back the third temple. Could be something else. Maybe we should be fixing the first three.
Right, good. Okay, good. So it's a question to ask. If you happen to be going to a shir in the next, 13 minutes, it's a question to ask. Okay, good. That is.
I have to relate it to the parsha, otherwise it doesn't get answered.
Is that so?
Yeah. Then I think it's if you have to say that's a question for another shir, then he has to drink a whiskey. That's all that would happen.
That's all that. Okay. I just shouldn't think what parsha is it? Va'era. Not so easy.
Goodness, that's not for us.
Okay, no, we're the more sober.
You don't have to drink. He has to drink.
Yes.
We're the more sober Wednesday night shift. Thank God. Okay, so I've got a beautiful quote here. What's a kind of summary? There's Ryakov Kamenetsky. Yeah, so Ryakov Kamenetsky writes, interestingly enough, you love this actually, Gideon, coming back to you, that the people seem to know where the original Aron was hidden, even during the Second Temple. Right? There's a story of someone who tried to retrieve it, and he tripped and died, or something like that. There was a protruding stone in the kind of near the Holy of Holies, and one of the Kohanim was kind of going to get the Aron. Basically, it was hidden in the first Beis Hamikdash when the enemies were kind of destroying the place. So he was about to retrieve it, he didn't, etc. That's the story. He died. Well, he didn't because he died. Yet they didn't retrieve and reinstall it. Similarly, the people kept their Aramaic language they picked up in exile, despite having returned to Eretz Yisrael. There's two kind of inconsistencies, right? Yeah. Why is that? So Riak Kamenetsky explains the second Beis Hamikdash was supposed to be temporary. This is what I told you before. Through it, the Jewish nation was to raise themselves up to the point they could merit the final redemption of the third temple. This is why the people kept reminders, such as their language, lack of Aron, to ensure they did not make a mistake. So they did not mistake this period for anything more than a conduit to the ultimate redemption. This is also why, some say, or he says, they didn't appoint a king from Beis David during this era. Now, what do I mean by that? Normally, the rule is that you're only allowed to appoint a king from Davidic dynasty. That's the rule. Yeah. Now, the Chashmonaim, remember of Hanukkah fame, they were from which tribe?
Must be Levi.
Levi, good, right. And David HaMelech came from which tribe?
Yehuda.
Who said Yehuda?
I did, if anyone else as well. I did.
Very good. Now you can all claim it, Yehuda, right? Now, so why did they not
They all said it, they were just on mute.
Why were they not? Why didn't they appoint a king? Why didn't they basically turn around to the Chashmonaim and say, "Oi, come on, enough! You had enough time with the sun. Now it's time to appoint a king from Yehuda." But they didn't, because it was temporary. It was supposed to be a reminder that this is not the real thing. Whether that's enough to remove the potential prohibition of appointing a non-Judean king is not for me to comment.
I mean, their dynasty was ended by war, so they didn't have a chance to appoint a king from Beis David.
Well, they had a bit of rulership.
Okay, you're saying whilst they were still in control.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, there's more to talk about here in terms of the dimensions and all that kind of stuff. And there's a Radak as well that says some of the halachas of the third Beis Hamikdash and the Kohanim were more stringent than previous two Mikdashos as well, which is interesting. So, for example, one example, he says, a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. We know that. But a Kohen is allowed to marry a widower. No, a widow.
Widow.
Sorry, widow. Sorry, widow. Yeah, a widow. Yeah. A Kohen is allowed to marry a widow. Now, the Kohen Gadol, however, is not allowed to marry even a widow.
Mhm.
Yeah. He says in the third Beis Hamikdash, even normal Kohanim will not be able to marry widows.
Okay.
That's one example. There are a few different things. Okay, we are moving swiftly on.
So does that, in the first Beis Hamikdash, was the Kohen Gadol able to marry a widow?
No.
So does that mean that, at least according to the Radak, the third Beis Hamikdash is going to be an even holier state? Meaning you started with the holiness of number one, dropped down to number two, and number three is going to be higher than even number one was.
Yeah. It would maybe higher and more permanent. That's definitely possible. Yeah, definitely possible. I don't know if that says more about the Beis Hamikdash or about the era of Mashiach, kind of, you know what I mean? I don't remember, to be honest. Anyway, okay, let's go. We're moving swiftly on to who will build the third Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, so we're looking for volunteers here. Let's see how we go. I don't think we'll have time to complete, certainly not the building this week, but let's kind of lay the groundwork and try and understand it. The net goes as follows. It looks like there are two very distinct opinions as to how the third Beis Hamikdash will get here, and I'm going to try and show you that they all agree. Isn't that nice?
Okay, go for it.
Let's go. Okay, so the first thing is the following. We yearn for the Beis Hamikdash, and the Rambam, which maybe should have been in the previous section, over here talks about its dimensions. I'll do the English. This is the first Mikdash was built by Shlomo, King Solomon, is described in Sefer Malachim. Great. Okay. Although the future Beis Hamikdash is mentioned in Cheskel, its dimensions are not clearly listed. Okay, the second Beis Hamikdash was built in the days of Ezra, was built similarly to the first Beis Hamikdash with some reference to what is mentioned in Chezkel. So let me make that a bit more simple. Okay, it's very clear. The first dimensions of the first Beis Hamikdash are pretty clear, right? Pretty clear. You get drawings and all that. It's clear, right? The second one is not clear at all. Second one is not clear. In fact, I remember when I was writing my book on Nach, I kind of tried to incorporate some drawings of the Beis Hamikdash, sketches or whatever, right? Not, I wouldn't be able to draw
But
them.
the second Beis Hamikdash, surely we've got like archaeological evidence, drone footage from above and things like that. You should surely have more idea of the dimensions of the second.
We've got some, but it's quite complicated. There are a lot of opinions as well. I don't think we have the full story. Anyway, so I went to this Temple Institute, and whatever I went kind of around the houses. They don't have a kind of thing we can incorporate, and I didn't really get anywhere. Right, didn't really get anywhere. So that now the third Beis Hamikdash is mentioned in Yechezkel. It's also not massively clear. So third is very not clear. The second was a combination of the first and the bits that aren't clear from the third. There you are. Okay, so what am I trying to get at with that? Just the dimensions basically aren't that clear. Right now, who will build the Beis Hamikdash? Not so clear. So this is very cute. This we're going to see together. Like I said, a little bit this week and a little bit next week. Now I'm actually going to change the order here because I want to start from these sources, which is like this. Let's start with Rashi. Here we are, Rashi. Okay, so I want to give you the context here. It's also quite important. Hopefully it won't be too complicated. It goes like this. Anyone heard of the concept called Chadash? It's actually a halachic issue called Chadash. It means that you can't partake of the new grains until the Omer offering has been offered. Right. So when we had the Beis Hamikdash, it was a bigger deal, but now it's also a deal, just a slightly smaller deal. Yeah. Then nowadays we're kind of a little more lenient, especially outside of Israel, but that technically is the law. Okay. Now, the Gemara says that at a certain point, one of the rabbis got up and said, you have to wait the whole day. Sorry, now we don't have the Beis Hamikdash. You have to wait the entire day of the 16th of Nisan, day after Seder night, basically, until you eat of the new grain. Right? And the Gemara goes back and forth. Why should that be? The Gemara ends off with saying, well, we're concerned with the fact that suddenly the Beis Hamikdash may be built, and we might make a certain error. Okay, let's not get into technicalities. And therefore, we will be eating the new grain too early. Right? Okay. Now, Rashi asks as follows, and I've actually got a little bit of a quote, which is only his answer. Rashi says, hold on a second. If you make that calculation based on the Gemara is saying maybe the Beis Hamikdash will be built on Yom Tov and at night. Rashi says we have a rule: the Beis Hamikdash is not allowed to be built at night nor on Yom Tov. Right? And here's where it starts. So says Rashi, that is only true of those rules are only true of the first two temples. But the third temple, Mikdash Ha'asid, the third one, Shanu Mitzapim, that we yearn for, Bani Mashachalahu, it's already built. Yigale v'yava min hashamayim, it's going to come from heaven. Shnema Mikdash Shem koni yadecha, as the Medrash says, that the Mikdash of Hashem, your hands have prepared.
Going on a wander, not turning heaven.
Yeah? In other words, the third Beis Hamikdash is going to be dropped from heaven. Maybe dropped is a bit harsh, but lowered gently from heaven. Now you can imagine the BBC headlines already. Yeah, vengeful God drops temple on ancient shrine, ancient place of worship.
Yeah.
But you can imagine that. I actually once said this in a share. They said, of course, BBC News won't be the first to report it. It will be Sky.
Oh,
Wow.
No, terrible.
Right, Trump will claim it's his.
There you are. Okay, so that is Rashi. Now the Rambam, and we're going to look at this in depth next week, please God. The Rambam sounds like actually No, it's not that the Beis Hamikdash will fall from heaven. We will have to build it. How so? So look at this. It says Hamelech HaMashiach. You see this one? The Rambam, it's interesting. He has at the end of his Mishnah Torah, kind of magnum opus, he has 2 chapters about redemption. One is about the qualities, like kind of the criteria, what qualifies to be Mashiach or who qualifies. And the second one is about what the Mashiach will have to do when he's here. So he says, Hamelech HaMashiach, Asid La'amod, is going to get up, Alahachzir Malchus David liyashna. He's going to return the Davidic dynasty to what it once was. Lememshala Harishona to its original rule. Ubona Hamikdash, and he will build the Beis Hamikdash and Makabetz Nidchei Yisrael, and he will gather all the dispersed. Sounds like that will happen after he comes, not before, which is interesting. But he will build the Beis Hamikdash. Now, it doesn't mean he personally will build the Beis Hamikdash, FYI. It means he'll oversee the building. Right? How do I know that? Because the Rambam says over here that everyone is obligated to build the temple, whether physically or via their material resources. Which sounds like it also applies to the third Beis Hamikdash as well. So in other words, Rashi seems to be saying the Mikdash will fall from heaven, and the Rambam sounds like he's saying that we'll have to build it. Moshiach will oversee, but we'll build it. The question we're going to deal with next week is firstly, where do they get that from? Right, where they get it from. And secondly, is there anything to suggest that actually they may not be arguing after all? Please God, that and more next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good week.
Have a good week, everyone.
Could fall from heaven just mean, you